to survive, we need to remember again how to think visually, how to think in terms of wholes. We're trying to design a new major right now at the college, and I can't say what it is. But the thing that convinces me that it's worth doing is the beauty of it. Then the question, has arisen, well, is that a sufficient grounds? It isn't, maybe, but maybe it is, because a feeling for beauty or for harmony, it's the fastest way often to discern the health of a situation. Mm-hmm. And health, is a cipher for that underlying, good functioning. So, we're not computers. We are, we're biological beings. We have that capacity, and we don't have the possibility of thought without that capacity.
This is Jonathan Pedro. Welcome to the Symbolic World.
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back here with Timothy Patitsas. Many of you have seen him on my channel once before, but most of you know him, as an author. And of the ethics of beauty, especially because it's a book that many people that have come to the symbolic world, and many people even that are coming to Orthodoxy today, are reading as part of their path on the way to that world. And it offers such a powerful vision, of human engagement and what beauty can do for us. And so, Timothy started a new film company that I just saw the first movie on Saint Amphilochios of Patmos, wonderful film. And so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to maybe talk a bit about that, but then obviously continue to talk about beauty and its importance for the meaning crisis. So Timothy, thanks for showing up.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
And so, how do you go from, professor, teacher at a college, dean at some point of the Hellenic College, and now starting a film company? What was the impetus for this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I like cinema. I certainly like, I think of film as, I think of it as, well, I think a lot about, how information has been recorded and transmitted over, the span of human existence. And this idea that, long before there was writing, there were people sitting around campfires telling, fires at night, telling stories. And it's so primordial. And it seems like such a good way to transmit information from generation to generation. And to me, the film on the big screen, the story is in the fire. You're in the dark. The campfire or the fire is the screen. That's the light. And the story is there too. And I think that's just so powerful and such a beautiful experience. And anything that can be told in that way, I think, is worth trying to tell. Of course, followers of Plato will say, we're looking at the shadows on the wall of the cave, and that it's really the worst way to tell information. But
I think as Christians, we don't also believe that. We think Christ actually fills the cave up. And so the idea that Christ fills up the world with his glory, and all things it's a different vision than from what Plato presented. It's like the images on the wall of the cave in the Christian vision have a reason for being there. And in some ways, they're the ones that would lead you up out of the cave if you were able to see them as an anagogical ladder. And so I think that I think that's a more consistent vision with how reality functions than the one Plato presents as just the illusions, and then someone kind of pulling you out of the illusions into this pure light.
That's so well said. Did I ever tell you the story of meeting the Patriarch of Antioch?
No.
It was a not the current patriarch, but the previous one. I don't remember his name. Maybe it was Ignatius. But I was at a conference, a bioethics conference in 2008 in Balamand, and someone said, the patriarch wants to meet you. like, there's 100 people at this conference. Like, what's that about? And we were summoned to a room and we waited. It was like, one of these sort of appointed rooms. And his beatitude came in and we stood up and took his blessing. There was another guy from Greece. And the patriarch sat down and he said, and he had this very classic voice as patriarchs tend to. And his was kind of like a little like rough sandpaper type of voice. And I won't try to impersonate him, but he said, "The trouble with you Greeks is that you are all dualists." And while we were, reeling from that opening statement.
The opening statement?
Yeah, that was
you asked me to come here.
Yeah.
I want to remind you invited me. I'm just saying.
And his next statement was, "Even a rock has a soul." And that was it. That was the whole meeting.
That was the meeting.
And of course, I had done Old Testament here at seminary, so I knew that the Semitic view, you don't say I have a body, you speak much more in terms of I am a body, I am this unity, and or at least my task is to make that integration even more so. And but certainly people think of Plato as as having introduced a kind of dualism into the West. Although Lev Shestov thought, it just depended which dialogue you were reading, whether Plato was the problem, But anyway, Plotinus was good.
Yeah. Well, Plotinus, definitely Plotinus is. And there's such a connection between Christianity and Plotinus that you do find some vision, a non-dual vision that takes you out of this problem. So tell us now why you started this film company, because we haven't answered that question yet. I just saw the movie. I just saw it last week. I was in BC doing a parish retreat, and someone said the movie Amphilochios, Saint of Patmos, is playing, and so there you were. I could see you, and you were you were actually in the movie. I didn't know you were going to be in the movie as well. And one of the things about it that really astounded me was, it was obviously the life of the saint, the powerful testimony, but also not shying away from some stories that were really out there, like that were really the story. The old lady saying how, the saint, when he was a baby, would not suckle, on fasting days, like that kind of really legendary type of way of speaking about saints. It surprised me. And in some ways I thought, like, of course, Timothy was not going to shy away from those types of stories, but I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah. So what did you think of the film as a film, though, overall? I mean, it's yeah, I won't. Is it well done?
I enjoyed it. Of course, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's a documentary, and it has all the tropes of the documentary. Panning visions of the areas with voiceover. I thought it was very well done. It did what it had to. And I'm curious to know why you chose that subject too, as well. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the birth of this project.
So one of my closest friends is Tamaida Hudanish, and she was the director of missions and evangelism for the San Francisco metropolis. So she was on the West Coast, I was here on the East Coast, and we would work together professionally or run into each other when she was in Boston doing stuff. And we both had wanted to do something in film or television that would help people experience pilgrimage. Mm-hmm. So I think both of us felt like pilgrimage is just such a central aspect of renewal and of joy in Orthodox life and in Christian life. And we've gone on lots of pilgrimages. And many times when we've been cool places, we've thought, if only I had a good camera right here, I could just say something, even if it's 30 seconds or a minute. And so we were looking in those terms. So we founded Beauty First Films, and people want to know. The film is called Amphilochios, Saints of Patmos, and he reposed in 1970. But we were looking for projects of what to do, and that would, I mean, for me as an educator, it's just a different way to educate. I don't mean that a film should be didactic. I mean that, because obviously as a Beauty First person, I don't think education is, involves the whole soul and everything. But we realized that the first ever feast day of this saint, Saint Amphilochios of Patmos, was coming up, in April of 2019. And we realized that it would be like a very defined window, that to tell the story of his life in the words of people who knew him or were big devotees and happened to come to the first feast day on the island of Patmos. I mean, the story sort of already writes itself, right? And it's not like a 6-month production or a 3-year production. It's just 4 to 5 days of interviewing everyone you can. So we knew it was a kind of a manageable bite-sized chunk. And that was, one reason why we went with it. And then, of course, we loved the saint.
Yeah. And so is your plan to do documentaries mostly, or you also would like to do some fiction?
This was 2019, so we went from Patmos, through Athens straight to Tel Aviv, and we filmed all of Orthodox Holy Week that year of 2019, which may have been a kind of special moment in time, the end of an era, as it turned out. So that is now in post-production. So that'll be our next film, and we'll just take it from there. I mean, we would certainly like to find, more financial support that could get one of us, not me, doing this full time, because I think we can do a lot more. And I don't know if you've seen our Beauty First Films liturgical seasons calendar. So we've got creative ideas, and Tamaida has a beautiful eye, so she knows how to make things.
Yeah.
Just,
so, I mean, I think it's a great project. It's a great idea. What do you see? Because of course you wrote The Ethics of Beauty, and now you're involved in making beautiful things. What do you see the role of beauty playing in the meaning crisis in general? Because we both are probably in a similar position. In order for people that are coming at it and are learning about Orthodoxy, it seems like beauty is also part of how they find a kind of solution to the meaning crisis, which would have seemed surprising to someone, if even 50 years ago. We'd say that one of the solutions to nihilism is beauty. But if you want to tell us a bit about how you see that functioning.
I mean, there's so many levels in which to answer that, and I there's more philosophical, more theological. I mean, I'm just starting with basic biology, which is that, most living things out there do not have a cerebral cortex, and yet they're making decisions just fine, and they're surviving, and they're propagating, and they are able to discern, the structure of the world, to the extent they need to, and to respond appropriately. And so, how are they doing this? They're doing this through sensation. And if you go down to, the most basic cellular level, it's somehow at the level of chemistry that, things are, the paramecium, the bacteria is out there sensing and reacting. So to imagine that human beings, unless you are an exceptional theist, I mean, not even a theist, but a Gnostic, then to imagine that human beings can divorce feeling from knowing, or divorce knowing from feeling and sensing, is really ridiculous. I mean, it's just nuts. Everything is out there making decisions and flourishing without the brain. I mean, just some things have brains, and then that's another story.
Why do you formulate it as beauty? Because if the way that I would formulate it originally is I would talk about goodness, in the way that Dante talks about goodness, or in the idea of that which is desirable, maybe even just that, like the idea of moving towards that which is desirable. And so why is it that you feel the need to formulate it as beauty?
Well, didn't Aristotle say that the beautiful is the radiance of the good or something? So to survive, we need to remember again, how to think visually, how to think in terms of wholes, we're trying to design a new major right now at the college, and I can't say what it is, but the thing that convinces me that it's worth doing is the beauty of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the question, has arisen, well, is that a sufficient grounds? It isn't, maybe, but maybe it is, because a feeling for beauty or for harmony is, it's the fastest way often to discern the health of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
And health, is a cipher for that underlying, good functioning. So, I mean, we're not computers. We are, we're biological beings, and we're just, we have that capacity, and we don't have the possibility of thought without that capacity.
Yeah, I think that's right. But there's an intuitive aspect to the way you're presenting it, which is that, our capacity to perceive health is it's a good way to talk about beauty in a way that might stretch people. When I look at someone, I perceive health very much so, because my whole being is there to detect that, to know, even in terms of like infection, even something like that, or to understand the situation I'm dealing with. And a lot of our markers for physical beauty are really just health markers and symmetry markers, to be able to tell, how aligned someone is towards reality. And so we can then understand that humans have that capacity in general, not just towards people, but also towards situations. When you enter a room and there's disorder, if people are moving in ways that is not normal, like, let's say you walked into a room where people have just had a fight, you will be able to detect that intuitively without thinking yet, because things will be laid out in a manner, and the movements of the people will be happening in a disorderly way, and you'll catch that really fast, even before you're thinking. And so, I think that's an interesting way of talking about a very, very immediate manner in which beauty matters.
There's so many aspects of this, and one of them is, I think, the pivotal chapter for the 21st century is chapter 22 of The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs, my friend and mentor. And that's the chapter where she presents Warren Weaver's summation of the past 360 years of science, science since we've had the scientific method. And he says, although science is vast and does a lot of things, in fact, there are three kinds of problems that we know how to solve. Three, as a genus of problem. There's only three. And one of them is the problem in organized complexity. And what Jane Jacobs does, the problem with, it's a living system, it's an organism. And society is like that. The economies are that, cities are that, families are that, institutions are that, companies are that. And when you are in that realm, Jane Jacobs gives you, here are the tactics for understanding those kind of systems. And in chapter 8 of my book, I lay this out, and I add several tactics of my own that are implied in her work, or that but an eye for beauty, training in beauty, or training in grammar, because, for me, beauty, goodness, truth is the trivium of grammar, logic, rhetoric. But training in pattern is the best training for understanding living systems or just systems. And a person trained, they know in a flash.
Mm.
And Jane Jacobs specifically says this, all the statistics that you can compile about, and in this case, it was Boston's North End, just, they don't tell you the full story. But to go there and observe unaverage clues, now you said, well, we better look for different statistics.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the city example is a great example in the sense that, and I mean, everybody's had these experiences. Like, you're walking in a city that you don't know. All of a sudden you take a turn, and then all of a sudden you realize that you've taken the wrong turn, and that now that you're not in a place you probably should be, or that you're in a place where all of a sudden the risk has gone up,
Yeah.
substantially. And you can tell that even if there's no people there, like even if there aren't people there that are suspicious or whatever, you can tell by a myriad of signs that are coming together in a pattern, that is saying that to you, and that I think is a great example to understand, and you can understand how sometimes, the cliche of fixing a city by saying we don't want broken windows, right? That kind of cliche where it's to say that if you actually transform the pattern of the city itself, you can even transform the culture that people live in. Because if I'm walking through a dump, I know that I can just toss something on the ground and it doesn't matter. Even if I might even not do that. But if I'm walking through a place that is cared for and pristine and is full of care and attention, then even my worst habits might be reined in by the space in which I'm in. I mean, that's a powerful testimony to beauty right there.
So yeah, I think training in the liberal arts or the fine arts, is vital for people to acquire wisdom or to lead at big picture level. Like, you shouldn't trust leaders who don't have a good aesthetic sensibility. And anyone could see that our approach to farming, this like highly centralized, government subsidized, the Cargills and all this, and the erasure of the family farm and of rural culture, and the chemicals and of different kinds, the fertilizers and the pesticides and all this, that compared to regenerative agriculture, anyone with a liberal arts degree will know one is sick and one is healthy.
Yeah.
But people trained in the other kinds of science, reductive or statistical, will not see that. And they will push us to the point of collapse. And that brings us eventually, now or later, to Iain Mcgilchrist, the master and his emissary. Because what he's doing in that book is saying, is basically saying that the brain hemispheres really are meant to unfold in a beauty, goodness, truth sequence. And that we've lost that. We've lost the right hemisphere. We've lost the feeling for wholes. And we are reflexively repeating things, that are good, that are driving us to exhaustion and destruction.
Uh-huh. And so, I mean, it's interesting because I imagine when you wrote The Ethics of Beauty, you weren't aware of Iain Mcgilchrist. So
No.
What has his work, how's it transformed your vision, or how's it affected the way you understand beauty?
I think it just made me want to kind of just collapse, exhausted. Like, we don't need my book. We've got that.
Oh my goodness.
I think he ought to read The Ethics of Beauty, and I ought to finish The Master and His Emissary. And then he's got this other one that's called the Matter with Things.
Oh my goodness, that book. It's like, if Iain Mcgilchrist, if you ever see this, that book, you're not allowed to write books like that anymore. We're not in the 17th century. It's like, this is an attack on us, this book. And so, I know people that have bought it and they keep it on their table as a daunting thing. I'm not even there yet. One day I will buy it, but then it'll stay on my table for like a year before I even touch it.
But I mean, the thing there with just what he shows you is that essentially you're meant that the two hemispheres do everything together, but that the quality or the kind of attention that the right hemisphere, for right-handed people, the right hemisphere brings is concerned with wholes. And then the left hemisphere is concerned with parts. And the way thinking ought to proceed, he says, is a sense of context, handing off to the left brain for analysis, handing back to the right brain for reintegration. So that's exactly what I lay out. I mean, The Ethics of Beauty is, it's a book about cognition. It's a book about many things, but it's the structure of what it means to know, and as a human being, not as a computer. So it's the same exact parallel. So no, what does that really add? I think just confirmation for me. It's confirmation. And then he has, kind of a theory of history of, that civilizations start out with a balance between the hemispheres, and then as they succeed, they get greedy. And as they get greedy and gluttonous, they start to rely more and more on the left hemisphere. They want more. And then this coincides with a decline in intelligence, like real intelligence, that global intelligence. And so they exhaust themselves. They just drive themselves to destruction.
Yeah. And so how do you see that in like this to me there is a challenge, let's say, I would say to us, even as Orthodox Christian, because, we have, at this point, it wasn't the case forever, but at this point, we have something that we could call a liturgical algorithm. Like we have a program. We've got it all. Like we've got all the books, and we've got all the canons and all the matins, and it's all there. And you could run it. Like you could probably run it, on a computer. You could have a computer running the services, and it would just be all timely, and you would have all the right canons and the right different hymns at the right time and everything. And I love Orthodoxy. I'm Orthodox. I became Orthodox. And so I'm playing devil's advocate here. But, it seems like from the outside, there is an argument to be made that there's a danger of that fixicity in the liturgical practice, which is that, take the book out, read the book. This is how it goes. You just follow the rubrics. That's how it works. And that we've lost the flexibility, that because we know the early liturgies had more improvisation in them, in the sense that we knew the sections, but that there was probably variation in different places in some aspects, although the liturgy was universal. I don't know if you've thought about that in terms of like the use of written prayer and all that, if it is an example of the danger of fixing, right? And of following the rules and the rubrics. I didn't know I was going to go here, by the way. This is it just came to me.
No, I've been thinking about this because it seems to me that to balance these two modes of awareness, this right hemisphere, left hemisphere, or the this holism and a more analysis, you need some kind of a ritual that will help you. The purpose of ritual and of liturgy is, to convert chaos into order, right? It eats chaos and it puts out order on the other side. But not just any order, it produces cosmos. Mm-hmm. And I think, the liturgy is not enough. You have people formed by the liturgy. You need liturgy at fractal scale. Mm-hmm. You need people who are internally liturgical, who are deeply prayerful and deeply repentant, and whose consciousness has been transformed. So the point of what McGilchrist is worried is that the left hemisphere deals with a representation of reality, not reality itself. Mm-hmm. And because that is easier to work with, and is more efficient to work with it prefers it. Liturgy is supposed to be openness to the radical unknown. And it's supposed to be openness to a God who is so vast that, without a mediation of liturgy, the encounter would crush us. Mm. And so hopefully it's the opposite of that. There's really no way to ensure it. I mean, it's just the adventure of freedom. But I think what happens practically, like this, our saint, in the movie, Saint Amphilochios, the moment his spiritual life started to get intense, he went straight to St. Nectarios. St. Nectarios was 75, 80, whatever he was. And St. Amphilochios was 19, 18 years old. And he would, travel from one island, quite a ways to the other for that guidance. And what other saints did Amphilochios know? Well, he was the spiritual father of Callistos Ware. He was the person who tonsured Saint Gavrilia, the ascetic of love. Those saints, they run to each other because beauty, goodness, truth is grammar, logic, rhetoric. Truth comes at this synodal level. It comes in some kind of a communion. We're constantly, it seemed good to the Holy Spirit and to us. And hopefully liturgy is unleashing that synodality. But I'm not worried about liturgy for the same reason the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous isn't worried about who's going to make sure an individual chapter of AA sticks to the rules. They don't, because they said the disease and death will take care of that. And if people are faking liturgy, then their spiritual lives will wander away to nothingness, and the organization will dissipate.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I think that the way you describe it as being held by the lives and the testimony and the experience of the saints, is I think that's the right way, because obviously, the fact that I have to go to confession, at some point, if I want to commune, that's not a program, right? It's not. I mean, you could probably do it as a program, if you wanted to, but it's definitely not running a program. It is always terrifying. It's always this kind of internal this kind of and so to and no matter how many times you do it, and no matter how many times you repeat the same stupid sins over and over, it's still, at least for me, is existentially it fills you with a kind of existential terror that does not have could not traffic in the kind of limited certitude that McGilchrist talks about in terms of the left brain and just of this kind of rational understanding. And so if that is what feeds us through the liturgy, then the liturgy becomes a dance playing out those inner struggles and that inner compunction.
I mean, the reason I didn't, mention beauty at first, and I mentioned, protozoa or something, is because, to Mrs. Blowfish, Mr. Blowfish must look attractive. It isn't. Yes, beauty in symmetry, beauty, that is something real, but spiritually, we are asked to look beyond that, or to, and there's other kinds of beauty that we encounter, and that, we see in the poor, or in the person who's broken down by life, or the person, there's something sacred about, a beautiful face. There is, but, you start to see other dimensions of beauty that are equally or more important. And
yeah, well, I think that there, even to argue it from a biological point of view, because life is costly, and it seems like it would make sense that at some point humans would be able to recognize the value of those that are willing to pay that price, and so the idea of someone, a warrior coming back that's maimed, that's scarred, that's someone, a woman who gave herself in childbirth and is affected physically, and she has the marks of that transformation. It seems like at the very basic level, of course, the beauty, like you said, but at a deeper level, and also over time, it seems like it would be necessary that people learn to recognize the beauty of those sacrifices, which is why girls love scars too. Chicks dig scars. Sorry to take you off that, but
No, I was thinking of something. Yeah. Yeah. I think this is true. And certainly the aesthetic of the church, which is not sweet or merely externally perfect, but it has, bears scars within it, that joyful sorrow, or whatever the word is, bright sadness. That's the aesthetic of the church. And it's more like, blues or bluegrass or jazz than it is like classical music. Although classical music, depends on the composer, balances joy and sorrow, in its great compositions as well. But Christopher Alexander talked about, that somehow that the building has to age to be truly beautiful. It has to kind of, it has to incorporate the passage of time, and that wear makes it start to come alive and glow with a certain fire.
I think that's right. I mean, our own experience of things that are supremely beautiful often, this is actually this has been my thinking about beauty, because we tend to say that beauty is harmony and beauty is symmetry and all these things,
Sure.
but then my experience of that was that that's not true. Like, it's not completely true. It's partly true, but it seems like, my perception of it seems like what we find beautiful, even visually, aesthetically, is something like symmetry adapted to a particular. It seems to be something like that. It seems to be something like balance that is well suited to a particular situation. And therefore, it has to encompass some type of play with its environment, whether it is the dings and scratches of use, or whether it is a beautiful church that is laid in a slope, or whether it is, so there's always this sense of order, but that is embedded in a particular that is more chaotic, or more that can be off even, and that seems to be part of how we experience beauty.
It's because, it's because in the kenosis of the Logos, which brings about the creation of the world, the kenosis is so complete that it's continually adapting to the creature, or to the situation of the creature, and this is fractal order, right? That in fractals everything is exactly to its place. And by the way, that's the Plato's cave answer too, because within the cave is another kind of, it's at every scale. And one of my former students, Georgia Williams, she said, I think that, she wrote an article about this somewhere, but she said, I think that what we call fractals is what Dionysius called the hierarchies.
Yeah.
And once you realize that the celestial hierarchies and the ecclesiastical hierarchies are fractal shapes, then everything, just a lot more things make sense. And first of all, hierarchy is not a dirty word anymore. It's just fractal structure. This is the way the world has to be, because what's being given is so infinite or beyond infinite, and what's receiving it is so, we're so weak, and we need, and that's another reason why, go film. Look, not everything, I cannot be in liturgy 24/7. So what about, what fills the space fractally? Other things, the other times. And
I think that's some of the things that I've been talking about in terms of, I use the family meal as an example of, a type of liturgical act, which is not strictly liturgical, but participates in the same structure.
yes.
And you could bring that all the way down to having coffee with a friend, or a conversation, or breathing, right? It's like these structures of kind of moving in and out of the mystery is there at every level. And the Jesus prayer, for example, as like the basic liturgical structure for your thoughts, kind of expands and can be seen through all aspects of life, and then into the grand cosmic liturgy of the angels. And I think your perception about how it's fractal, obviously very akin to the things that I talk about, but the idea that that hierarchy is actually just the way the world works. It actually is condescending. People always think of hierarchy as something which separates, but hierarchy is also something which unites, because it adapts its glaring light to the particular situation, and sometimes, we don't understand that. Even in our lives, we don't understand that we're not ready for the vision of the divine logos. It's like, you don't want that, actually. And so you have to, when you receive the little graces that you receive, this is God loving you, right? Even if it's the smallest grace, it's God loving you, because the reason why you receive the small graces where you receive them, is because that is your capacity to receive them. They're the ones that can provide fruit. If the faucet was open and the grace just fell on you, you'd burn. Like, you'd burn in hell. Like, you would be you would be overwhelmed. And so that's why I think hierarchy is so, if we can help people understand how hierarchy, what it is actually, and that it's not just like a, you know, authority and power coming down, but it is this condescension of authority down to the level that's appropriate, you know.
Saint Silouan, you know, he had a vision of Christ when he was still a novice at Vespers. And he said afterwards, if that vision had lasted even one more second, I would have died. And so that is that and I'm thinking of a recent elder in Russia who, a man came to him, said, I'm dying of cancer. I've heard you're a miracle worker, heal me. And he said, do you believe in God? He said, no. Then the priest said, do you want to believe in God? He said, no. And so the priest, without really, missing a beat, he said, well, do you want to live? Do you love life? And the man said, yes. And so the priest healed him. And this is a true story from the 90s. And I think, look, I know in the film, some things happen and are said that, are like that. People like to mock the thing about babies that won't nurse on fast days. But Mother Nectaria, my other great mentor, this was said about some elders that, we knew, and she went to Cyprus and talked to like the women of the village, and they just said, hey, it was the darndest thing. They didn't make a big deal out of it. But
that's amazing.
It still continues to happen that, some kids are just born with that much grace, but it's not something I think about a lot because that's not my reality.
Yeah. Well, that's why I loved it when you put it in there, because I think like a more modern type of person, like a modern type of filmmaker would have not put that in, because it's so counter the way that our lives are, because our lives are so mundane to some extent. But like you said, the medieval world was full of these stories, and to think that they're all made up is ridiculous. It's just the world was just, some people live in a world that is more of a dance than ours. And in the moments where you actually experience that dance, you should understand that maybe that dance could be 10 times more than the one that you're experiencing right now in these little moments.
It is a thing, but I think that the danger is, to like chase those things for themselves.
Yeah.
The thing is, the first commandment Christ gave us, in his incarnate ministry was repent. And St. Patitsas said, just pray for a spirit of repentance. Don't ask for anything else, because you won't be able to handle it when it comes. And that's the found. And if we can just pray for a spirit of repentance, and then miracles can come and go, or, people can tell stories. And sometimes, people tell stories and they do seem kind of made up, and, you let that go. And it's not a huge thing. The point is, to have your own, hopefully, dynamically alive relationship with Christ, and to let that, hold these other things along.
Yeah.
And
so the biggest affront, at least on its face, to beauty is the cross, because the cross is the most horrible thing. It's presented that way in scripture. It's presented that way in it's an object of torture, and Christ is tortured. But nonetheless, we have the intuition, and we hear it in the church, and that in fact the cross is beautiful. And so how do you square that? Like, how do you see that coming together?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I
love I said that. I don't know.
I certainly find my crosses hard to bear, but I find yours very beautiful. I find, meeting someone who's willing to risk their lives for me. I was in a fiery car crash in 2017, and thank God the car didn't tip, but it was really on fire. And as I emerged out of the fire, there just happened to be a fireman getting off duty. And when I thank God that the car didn't flip, because then that might have just either been the end of me, or I would be even uglier than I am. No, just kidding. I would have, really been, had all kinds of things going on, would be hard row to hoe, and my faith is not, infinite. But my main reason I'm happy is that poor guy, he was just coming home from work on a Sunday morning. And would he have had to go into the flames for me? That would be awful. I mean, but had he done it, yeah, it's just beautiful that God put him there, and that, that he was ready, seemed ready.
Mm.
So certainly, and when we encounter in a relationship that the other person is unwilling or unable or psychologically unready to bear even the smallest cross for us, that's really sad. That's much harder, than, and then we realize, well, we've got to up our game, and we've got to carry a few more crosses for the life of the world, and stop trying to be so pretty and focus on being beautiful, or on being good, and then letting the beauty come out of that.
Yeah, because it was interesting. I'd never had that experience before, but I was at Mount Athos you actually helped organize my first trip there, by the way. Thank you. I'll say that in public. That was wonderful. But I went back again, as you know, with Jordan Peterson, and we met the abbot of Xenophon Monastery we were. And to me, that was really something of an experience of the deep beauty, because he was a broken old man. His back was out, and he had all the characteristics of a very elderly person who's had a very full life, but it was impossible to stop looking at him. Like there's something more than just the usual advertisement, Hollywood aspects of what we find to be beautiful. And it was a visual thing. Like it part of it was visual, not just visual, but part of it was visual. Is that he was hypnotizing. Like it was difficult to stop looking at his face, because there was so much simple joy and a kind of presence that was exuding from it. And so I think I did have like a little bit of a vision of how the cross can be beautiful, although when we make icons of the cross, we're careful, we try to make it in a way that won't attract to the kind of torture aspect of the cross. And I think it's good that we do that, but we also know that that's what it was. We know that Christ on the cross visually did not look the way that we represent him in an icon. We're trying to represent the inner aspect, that kind of transform aspect, but the outer aspect would have been horrible. But that was a moment where I felt like I was able to see a surprising, in someone who is, old and close to death, and has had this full life of sacrifice, that there was something shining. So anyways, I'm sure other people have had experiences like that, but to me, that was helpful to help me understand what beauty is, in the deepest way.
Well, somehow as a society, we had our kind of Disneyland phase of beauty, and we took that into our personal lives somehow, and expect, even our spouse or something to be like that. But I think, in McGilchrist's point is that, we're in a societal crisis, or a civilizational crisis. And somehow the thing is, I don't think that all he can really do is point very dimly, to religion, or to even philosophy, something that, to say that the brain, functions in this way, doesn't really give you a program. It just tells you that you might want to pay attention to people who have the program. And I don't know.
Yeah, there is. There is I think that his recent book, like I said, I haven't read it. I think his recent book is different, in the sense, I think that he is trying to give more of a vision of how to live, because it's true that in The Master and His Emissary, it's like it's a critique, and saying to someone, use your right brain more, it doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't mean anything existentially. It's not a phenomenological proposition. It's an analytical proposition. It's a left brain way of talking about the problem. When you say this, it's a brain problem, like it's an experience problem, it's an engagement problem. It's not actually a problem of the brain at the outset. And so I think in some ways he's a bridge, because he's actually using left brain way of talking about the world in order to show the problem. And it helps people kind of understand what it is. But honestly, like, the brain has very little to do with your experience. Like, you do not experience your brain, and your brain, you don't, your brain is an abstraction in your life. It's not something that you don't experience things through your brain. You don't, be careful people understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying the brain doesn't do what we say it does. I'm saying that it's like the motor of your car, right? You drive the car and you have a steering wheel and you have the pedals. That's your experience of the car. Like, you don't experience what's happening inside the motor is very secondary to your experience of driving. And that's also I think one of the issues with, not the issues, but I think that's in some ways where McGilchrist and the Master's Emissary kind of leaves us off with this kind of technical way of talking about it. But I never, like, I wouldn't use that. I wouldn't say right brain, left brain thinking, because
I think chapter 22 of Death and Life is better, in the sense that it just tells you that we have three modes of science, and we prefer the first two because they give us, the illusion of control and the illusion that the universe is a dead thing. And the other one is just a lot harder. But the fact is, see, if I were a corporation, how would I just absorb all this and try to stay unrepentant? I would just say, well, let's just get out there and fund some great liberal arts programs, and let's just hire their graduates, and we'll have them and the engineers, balancing each other. You could just try to operationalize it like that. Like, we'll get your artists involved, or just get. The problem is that life is a much harder form of art. And yeah, the liberal arts are indispensable, but then you've got to have the way of the heart. You've got to actually pursue the sacred and the holy, and you've got to do it well. And
it's education too. It's about people. That's the you're gonna have to do. You can't make it into a system. It really is. The difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher is the world. And we just send our kids to high school, and then we just don't know who their teachers are. But the reality is that all the great colleges were built on people. They're not built just on abstract knowledge. And, I was, I don't know if you know about Ralston College. I just came back from there, did an event there. McGilchrist also.
Good things.
Yeah. And they're building it, I think, in the right way. They're building it based on, it's like connections and people, and understanding that, a valuable person is more than a program, that we need the program, but to have the right person in the right place, that has the right intentions, connecting with the students, is more valuable. And anyway, it's pretty astounding what they're able to do. It gives you hope, for liberal arts, for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to learn more about it. Of course, I think Hellenic College has the edge right now of any liberal arts school in the nation, just because the reason I became friends with Jane Jacobs is because I noticed that she was describing cities as if they were really liturgies. And I think when you study living, real organic life, it always has this, that breathing that you mentioned, that sign of liturgical living things are constituted liturgically. And to have that be part of your college experience. Now, if some young person is listening to this and, they can't come here necessarily, we don't have an engineering program, but if you can put pilgrimage into your life and get good at liturgy and understand what is the way of knowing that's imparted. Of course, we have them both here, and it's still a struggle. That's just life. I mean, every day is a struggle. But yeah, in some sense, we're the ideal college at the moment, although thankfully no one seems to realize that.
Well,
because
we'll see.
We can
after
only
this.
handle 30 freshmen a year, or whatever.
I can't wait, because for people who don't know, I am going to be at Hellenic College in a few weeks on, was it April 17th?
It's 17th. That's a Thursday, right? Thursday night.
Is that when the event is? Because I have 3 days, but it's around there. It's like
I
we'll
think
put
you're coming on Wednesday and we're hanging out on Thursday and it's Thursday night. I think it's Thursday night and tickets are available on Eventbrite.
All right, so on Eventbrite, I will be at Hellenic
And they're
College. I think
selling
it's
out
on
fast.
the 18th. So get your ticket. I can't wait to see the college because, I've never been there. And so I can't, and I am definitely interested in the future of education and also especially liberal arts education. So it's wonderful to see an Orthodox based community trying to do liberal arts in the right way. I think it's great.
Liturgy has to have a component of being long and boring. If everything is as a purpose function, then you remain mired in the left brain, and all you're really doing with your Christian faith is doubling down on the mistake of the civilization, which is to not be beauty first, and is to be so entranced by the power of utility that you're just a danger to yourself and others.
I love you saying that, your liturgical life has to be long and boring to people watching.
There
But
has to be. Like,
it
you
has
got to
to be.
wait out yourself and your own flighty mind
That's right.
and come to something deeper.
Yeah, because anybody who's been through a long liturgical service will notice that at some point your thoughts just go crazy. Like your thoughts just kind of go all over the place. And at first you don't notice it, but after you've been through several services, you're like, wait a minute, I'm not here anymore. Like I'm just not even here. I'm somewhere else. I'm thinking about, especially if you're a creative person like me, who has plenty of things to think about, plenty of stories to write, plenty of, so it's so easy to write stories when you're doing liturgy, right? It's like, oh yeah. But it's a good exercise because it makes you realize to what extent, you're a slave of your thoughts and of these, of these logismoi that kind of drop in. So yeah, it's good to do that.
I feel bad for mentioning Hellenic. I'm not trying to hijack, the podcast. I mean, but because the larger issue though, is, I've been reading a lot of Wendell Berry this Lent. I'm trying to make that part of Lent because, he's calling for some kind of social repentance, and you can see how it really syncs with McGilchrist. And there is repentance should lead to kind of social renewal. And I think we see very clearly now that our mental inability to comprehend beauty or its importance or to give it the respect it's due is a mental state that needs to be repented of, and that's what repentance is. It's change to renew and transform the mind. I don't know. We didn't get into something else maybe for another time, but it does seem like our civilization is a struggle between the nominalists and the realists.
Yeah.
The only solution is the symbolic, and that's what you're trying to lead us back to. Yeah. So I think the things that I'm saying are kind of just very small pieces of that. What your work is the main work, that somehow to recover the symbolic vision, that's where the nominal and the real are reconciled.
But no, I think that both of us are very much in parallel, which is why people, when they read your book, they feel like that we're cousins in thinking, like that you're completing some of the things that I'm saying, and I'm coming close to the things you're saying. And so I think it's a wonderful.
Yeah, sorry.
It's wonderful to know you're on my team, is what I was going to say, or that I'm on your team, that we're on the same team. Let's say it that way.
You were saying something I'd never heard before, which is the best thing ever. You said that the word for the devil, right, is the avalo, to separate, is the exact opposite of symbol, to symbol. And that's the best thing ever. That really just puts it all right there, doesn't it? But this war between nominalists and realists, and of course the Anglo-American response is to sit on the sidelines and through this faint memory of their Byzantine, inheritance and the Celts, to be skeptics of both. But that Anglo-American skepticism is kind of wearing out. People want the thing itself.
No, I think so. But the thing is that nominalism is going to end with is ending with blood. Like it's going to become, the Enlightenment thinking and that all of this is crashing. It's all falling apart. It's happening rather fast. COVID was like an accelerant of all of the aspects of, let's say religious impulse and all of that kind of crashing back in. So, I think that it's time to deal with this. It really is time to be able to formulate and to participate in meaning in ways that are fractal, instead of, swaying crazily between, chaos and tyranny, which is the tendency that we've embarked on, I think since the beginning of the Enlightenment. And so I think that helping people to formulate, but not just formulate theoretically, but also engage and practice this fractal relationship between unity and multiplicity at all the different levels. The music, right? The music of the spheres, really. That's and the great thing about it is that when people understand it and when people kind of see it, it rings so true that once you've seen down that door, there's no turning back. It might be difficult to do it and integrate it. It's difficult to live it completely. But once you've seen this hierarchy of fractal relationships, you can't go back to the old way. I don't think so. And so at least I think we have reality on our side, is what I mean. Like liturgy, the idea that the reality is liturgy is just true. And so, as the more people can perceive it and engage with it, it will win in the end, no matter how crazy it becomes. Truth will rise. There's no other way. Because it's like if things decompose, and then the fractal seed that came from the tree that's planted in that decomposed, that's the one that's going to grow. So I know it because that's how it works. And that's actually how it works in the world. And that's how it works at all the scales. And the stories tell us about the remnants that are taken out and that are planted and grow again. And so I don't see another way.
In his letter to the Soviet leaders, Solzhenitsyn, is calling for a social repentance for Russia.
Mm.
Because he says it's time to let the republics go and find their own way. One of his regrets is that all the best minds were studying military electronics. All the young people were drawn to that, and they were neglecting the humanities. I mean, it's such a sacred thing if a person can give themselves to the study of literature and the classics, or literature and theology, literature and art. There's so much. The great, when we talk about education as the great conversation, right? This beauty, goodness, truth, or grammar, logic, rhetoric. The rhetoric stage, it's blood work, but there's a synodality. You've got to enter the communion of saints. You've got to engage with the other great writers and the great, everything or whatever you're doing. They are summoning you, and to their company. I no longer call you disciples. I call you friends. They are summoning you to that friendship. And it's just that life is so busy and people don't have time to read. At least they don't feel, at least with film, they're getting something.
Yeah.
But,
audiobooks, there's a solution.
Everyone likes the audiobooks. Yeah, that's the way to go.
There's something that are hard to read with audiobooks, but for sure, audiobooks have been a lifesaver for me, especially as a dad with 3 kids working full time. It's like, and then doing all this other stuff. The audiobook is wonderful. Then you want to drive, like you actually want to drive your kids places because you get to listen to the audiobook. So that's been wonderful. And it's weird. It's weird technological version of the monks reading during dinner in the monastery. It's not completely the same. It lack. I mean, obviously it's a superficial version of that, but I think that we're attuned to listening to things being told to us since we're children, being read to. And so I think there's something intuitively right about the audiobook that you can easily, kind of pay attention while you're doing other things and let it seep into you.
So more people need to, more young men in the Orthodox tradition need to come to the priesthood, because if that's their symbolic act is, the defeat of the disintegrative act, then that's a different way to present this calling, this ministry, because someone has to stand like Moses, with their arms up. So maybe that is part of the answer, just that increasing, but all of us participate in that priesthood of the church. And that's, the problem is us, right? Like, and that's the great thing, about, I think, all Christian faith, but Orthodoxy in particular. The one I know well, like, you are encouraged to realize that, you're the issue.
You're the problem. The problem is you. I think that's a great way to end our conversation. The problem is you, but the community of the saints are calling you, and not just the saints, but the communion of all those that came before us, the great thinkers, the great writers, those that have, showed us what is beautiful, good, and true. They are calling us in to participate. So
can I mention a dream I had recently? Because it's so fun. I was meeting LeBron James for the first time, and it was such a spiritual dream. I was in tears. It was like this, and I said, "You've given so much effort to excellence. You've worked so hard to be excellent at what you do," and it just brought me. I'm not really even a basketball fan, but there's so many people out there giving their all for beauty in different ways.
Yeah. So, come into the dance, everybody. So Timothy, thank you for everything. I can't wait to see you again at Holy Cross and at Hellenic College in a few weeks.
Yes,
and I wish you all the best luck also with the movie and the upcoming movie on Holy Week. I can't wait to see that as well. So thanks, Timothy.